These two areas have helped my fishing more than anything else. And the first one is not something that I picked up on my own, but was taught to me by some terrific anglers. The first skill is to be able to visualize how bass travel and use cover and structure around them. Let me give you an example. Let's say I take this highway overpass. I'm driving down the road and I see this. Now, let's imagine it underwater. Where are all the places that bass would travel along? We know that bass love edges and places where two or more types of cover or structure intersect. Now, all of a sudden, we can start to paint a clear picture of what is likely going to be high percentage places. Some are obvious, and the problem is they're obvious to everyone. But let's look at the less obvious ones that are clear edges. The first one I want to check is where the vegetation line is. The shade from the bridge will create a clear line where the vegetation stops growing, and that is a terrific travel route to deeper water. Then, of course, the shade line is something that we cannot overlook as well. Bass will often sit in the shade looking out into the brightly lit water, a clear advantage for a predator and also a travel line. But here's one of my favorites. The edge that is created where the slope meets the lake bed. Remember, we are imagining this underwater. I have filmed bass traveling along that edge created by the slope and bottom of the lake or pond many times. This is a high traffic edge used by bass that is often overlooked by anglers. So that was number one, being able to visualize all the edges in an area. And the next skill that took my bass fishing to the next level was the ability to feel what is going on and decipher it with your lures. The equipment today that is available is incredible. Lightweight yet strong rod blanks are super sensitive, high performance braids that transfer even the smallest bumps up the line. But that ability here to pay attention to that information and translate it to what is actually down there is key to catching many more bass. For example, when you're dragging a lure across the bottom, noticing the type of bottom composition or cover that the lure is hitting when you get a bite is the first step to making that situation repeatable. It can mean all the difference between, let's say, catching one fish on a spot to catching multiple. I will never forget when I was fishing Lake Onalaska in Wisconsin, we hit this one spot that had a shell bed mixed amongst some vegetation. When that lure hit that shell bed, you could almost predict the bite. But being aware of what that lure is constantly doing is not as easy as it sounds. The times our lure is up off the bottom is much more often than we realize, and that has a lot to do with how we move the lure with our rod. The awareness to change the rod technique based on how close the lure is to us is important to maintaining bottom contact. A traditional 9 to 11 type rod lift may work fine when that lure is a long distance away. But as it gets closer, all we're doing is pulling it up off the bottom and losing that feel of what is going on. Constantly be working on what that bottom composition feels like. And hey, if you want to watch a video that shows what I call the mother lode of bass, I couldn't believe how many bass we're holding on this one particular spot. Go ahead and check this video out right here, and make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.